Hi, everybody. This is State Representative Gloria Johnson. I'm here today on Democratic television, on local community television. So I'm excited to be here today with one of our candidates for governor, Dr. Jason Martin. I came to know about Dr. Martin and his wife, also Dr. Martin, through their concern over the COVID virus when we all knew that this was coming down the pike and talking about how to address it. Both he and his wife have been very active from the beginning in making sure that we're keeping our community safe. So I think probably one thing that folks would like to hear, Dr. Martin, is how you came to this big decision of running for governor of Tennessee.
Yeah. So how did this happen? Yeah, Representative Johnson, thank you so much for having me on the program tonight. So it was a big decision, and certainly not one that our family took lightly. I mean, I've not been in politics before, but I've got a career of service here in Tennessee, working on the front lines of healthcare, and that's where my priority has been until I became a party to staggering losses over the last 18 months. I mean, I work in Sumner County in small ICUs, just 18-bed ICUs. And even in those facilities, we've had to say goodbye to more than 350 of our patients, related to COVID-19. It's just been a staggering loss to deal with. And, for us, that meant holding up iPads and watching moms and dads and brothers and sisters wail into that screen and say goodbye to their loved ones over the internet. And, that was unbelievably, painful for the families, obviously, unbelievably painful for us to see that sort of loss. And so, I thought that what we were observing was never matched by any leadership by Governor Bill Lee. It was never matched with any actions from Governor Bill Lee to keep, my patients or our communities safe. And so I felt like there was an opportunity to do more. Initially that led me down a path of advocacy work, which is how we met, doing advocacy work related to COVID-19. But then ultimately I realized, that same lack of leadership that has killed 17,000 Tennesseans, that same lack of leadership that has left our small businesses in shambles and our kids out of schools for hundreds of days, impacts other aspects of life in Tennessee, like affording a quality education, to our public school students, or ensuring adequate access to healthcare for our citizens. And so I wanted to get involved and try to address the lack of leadership in those areas as well.
Well, I think that you summed it up perfectly. It is that lack of leadership and really understanding that the safety and health of a community is, that's how we keep our economy strong. That's how we keep our state strong. All of those things work together, and they are just absolutely critical. And, we've had to learn on the fly because this whole pandemic is new. And I know you guys have had to make a lot of adjustments. And that's one thing that is really critical in leadership and government, is that somebody is able to adapt and adjust to those changes. And clearly, that you have shown in your service that you can do that, because with this virus, you guys have to do that constantly. And
that's absolutely right. The clinical practice of treating COVID has changed dramatically over the last 18 months. And certainly, government's reaction to COVID-19 should have been nimble as well. It should have met the community, where the needs are. But unfortunately, we've had a governor who's been all too willing to play politics with this virus to try to score political points. And he's not worried about the expense. He's not worried about lives lost. He's not worried about jobs lost. He's not worried about, the suffering of our small business owners. And so I think it's important that we have someone who's going to tell the truth, someone who's going to be politically courageous, and someone who's not going to do things like fire the state's chief vaccine officer in the middle of a pandemic, or undercut school districts that are trying to protect themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. What we have seen is so much overreach with this governor, reaching into what the local control can do. It's funny because as someone on the Democratic side of the aisle, I've always heard how Republicans are all about smaller government and letting locals be their own. And I've seen none of it.
Yeah, it turns out it's only if you agree with them that they like for you to do your own thing. Yeah.
Right, because that's just not what we are seeing, and it's incredibly frustrating. And one of those things, certainly, where I feel like we have just made hot potatoes out of our children when it comes to schooling and all of that. We had special session to give this money to these summer programs without really talking to teachers. When students were exhausted, when teachers were exhausted, you couldn't find somebody to run the summer programs. And we found out a lot of the summer programs boiled down to more computers, which is something we found out, wasn't the best. And a lot of us already knew that online learning doesn't work for most kids, but that was apparently a new thing for those across the aisle. And we all wanted to get kids back in school. And so, but we knew to do that, you need mitigation.
That's right.
And that was the fight back and forth. And now we have a situation where we've done better financially than expected during this pandemic. We have a funding stream to fully fund and adequately fund our public schools. How do you feel about how we're doing when it comes to public education and funding our schools?
Well, that's a great question. No one wants to talk about COVID all the time. We're all tired of it. But COVID really did expose a lot of long-lived inadequacies and inequities in our education system here in Tennessee. And I think you alluded to it a little bit there when you said, some communities were able to go remote and provide electronic resources and other communities were not. And there have been haves and have-nots in education in this state for a long time. We're in the bottom 40s in the entire country when it comes to per pupil spending. How can that possibly be when we're sitting on billions and billions of dollars in a surplus? They call it a rainy day fund. I call it a surplus. It's our money. It should be spent for the good of our citizens and our students and our hardworking teachers. I wish they could be as proud of, amazing school buildings, fully resourced teachers as they are of that big pile of money. Because, I believe strongly that we need to be reworking the BEP, the basic education program, but with the priority of fully funding it, not defunding it, which is afraid of what they're up to these days.
Yeah, and we talk about that a lot as educators. We know there's a problem with the BEP. There's not enough money in there. We know there are about 11,000 teachers funded outside of the current BEP. But right. The reality is, if we go ahead and fund those positions and accept that as part of our BEP, we'd be okay. The problem is when the governor's talking about changing the funding formula, he's talking about working from the same size pie and cutting it differently. That's right. Instead of creating a bigger pie. And in reality,
he's not committed to more money in the program, which I think is a flaw. Like I'm sure that you're the same way. I don't think every problem deserves $1, but this one needs a lot. It needs a lot of money.
When you're 46, anywhere from 44th to 46 in funding public education, you are not going to break the top 25 in outcomes. That's and right. We have legislators that keep saying that's going to happen. And it's not going to happen if you're 46th in funding. It's just not. When you take the 8 states surrounding us in our Southeast region, we are funding, and you take the average that all those states spend, we're funding at $1.7 billion below the average of the states around us. I'm not talking Massachusetts and New Jersey. I'm talking about
regional players,
Southeast states. And so that tells you how badly we are doing. But yet, in addition to the massive amounts of money we continue to put in the rainy day fund, we have other surplus piles of money that they're trying to figure out where they need to go. And very clearly, our public education system is one of those. And I have to say that one of my pet baby projects, of course, are the community schools, which we have quite a few of in Knoxville. You won't plan to visit those here in Knoxville, haven't got a chance to do that, but you were at the Sunbright Community School events a couple of months ago, because I was there as well. How did you feel about that program and what's happening with our community schools?
Yeah, that was a really kind of uplifting day for me. So the whole community school concept revolves around, in case folks in the audience don't know, involves using our schools, which are typically not active from 3 p.m. to 7 a.m., using those facilities that are already paid for in our community to provide wraparound services of all different types to meet a variety of community needs. And seeing the Sunbright School open was heartwarming. It was so cool to see public and private partners coming together to make life better for kids in that community. And I think it's a great model that could be exportable to other parts of the state to help meet the specific needs in individual communities.
Yeah, that's the thing that's so cool about it. This will be the first that I'm aware of community school in a rural community. Most of ours are more in urban, but because the thing that's so neat about this model is it's what that particular community itself needs. Mm-hmm. And so you base it around whether it was a suburban area, urban, or rural. That community has been hit hard by the opioid epidemic, and there are a lot of kids that aren't living with their parents. And so there's a lot of supports needed, whether it be mental health or physical health. Those kinds of things are going to be provided, be part of the work. So it's just really exciting to see some of these communities getting the services that they need and going back to making the school the hub of that community. Like, it's a new idea, sort of, but in a way, it's a really old idea.
That's right. Yeah, it's building on something that's been in place for Tennessee for a long time. The community, the school in your community was where parents came together. It's where kids came together. It's where community events were held. And so we're trying to build on that to provide more services because, teachers have a lot of hats that they have to wear these days. And I know I'm not telling you anything, but I think this is another way that we can support our educators by, supporting their students.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about healthcare in so much as Medicaid expansion and how we can get care, because we're hit hard in COVID, and we see the inequities in education, but we also see the inequities in healthcare because of those who don't have access because we didn't expand Medicaid. What's your feeling there?
Yeah, so this has been, and again, another longstanding problem in which inadequacies and inequities were just displayed for the world to see. After I did residency, I had a chance to work at Meharry Medical College, the nation's oldest historically Black medical college, and I was also on staff at the Nashville General Hospital, which is a safety net hospital in Middle Tennessee. And in that role, I got to see the things that we do well in public health, but also the opportunities for improvement. I mean, I'm thinking of some of the patients that I saw that declined care. I'm thinking of one patient in particular who had a lung tumor, but that patient declined care because they didn't want to saddle their family with medical debt. And ultimately that patient, died on my watch, and it was terribly sad. And people are having to make life or death decisions because of access to healthcare. And I don't know if people fully understand that, but we have hundreds of thousands of Tennesseans who are uninsured in this state. So, there are a couple of other really scary trends in this state that I think we need to push back against. First of all, did you know that we are number one in the nation per capita when it comes to hospital closures right here in Tennessee? We've lost 14 hospitals since 2012, primarily in our rural communities which are more likely to be uninsured or underinsured than some of our more urban communities. We're also number one in the nation per capita when it comes to medical bankruptcies. We are breaking our families with medical debt. And so if you sit back and say, what's the quickest way we can get affordable healthcare insurance, not a giveaway, affordable healthcare insurance to hardworking Tennesseans? It's through Medicaid expansion. It's costing us over $1 billion a year not to participate in that program. And I tell people, if you can't see the argument just with your heart that it's the right thing to do to take care of your fellow Tennesseans, just think with your pocketbook, because it makes great economic sense to extend affordable healthcare insurance to folks so that they can be healthy and go out and work hard and support themselves. And the final point that I would make about Medicaid expansion is that if you want economic growth across the state, not just in the cities, but also in the more rural communities, you need to have this more money in the healthcare system, because that's going to bring healthcare facilities back to rural Tennessee. That's going to bring an environment that's more favorable for businesses to want to come and set up shop.
Yeah.
So lots of moving parts.
And absolutely. And that's why all of these things like education and healthcare, they're all cross over and interwoven with each other. And it's all about creating that great economy, because if all of our students do well and we provide good education for them and good jobs for them, they'll want to stay in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
That's
we
right.
want to keep those great minds here. And so many times we see folks leaving our state because our opportunities are not at, you know, what they should be.
That's
when you're
right.
talking about losing hospitals, I know the first two we lost were in West Tennessee, near that West Tennessee mega site where we now have Ford coming in. But one of the big problems there was no hospital close by because we lost those hospitals.
So we've had a chance to visit all 95 counties in the state of Tennessee since August. The number one concern we hear from Memphis to Mountain City, the number one concern that we hear is access to healthcare. I was shocked to learn that 1/5 of our counties does not even have an emergency department. So you think about, you know, if you're a business owner and you want to drop your office or your plant or your factory in a region, are you going to do it when you're 100 miles from a hospital? Probably not. And so, you know, we really need to enhance our access to healthcare so that we can grow economies, give people jobs they can be proud of and support themselves with.
And then when we talk about those hospital jobs, when a hospital in a rural area closes, it's probably one of the best employers in that area,
Right.
where folks have good jobs with good wages and good benefits and all of those things. And those are gone.
That's right.
And there's nothing that's coming in there to replace that number and that level of good jobs for folks.
You know, if anyone has an alternative idea, where is it? Because, you know, the Republicans and Governor Lee have had years and years to address these trends, but they have persisted, you know, and it's a lack of leadership. And so I think that this is another opportunity for Democrats to go out and make a difference, because I believe that access to healthcare is not just a Democratic issue, it's a Tennessee issue, and it's one that we can make a difference with.
No, absolutely. I think you're right. And we saw now that it's been true and tested in so many other states.
That's right.
Now, there are more than 40 studies in other states showing how successful it's been and why. You know, in states like Michigan, they really looked at their lower income folks and how it lifted them up out of poverty and made them able to get loans, to buy a car, to get that better job, because
opioid deaths go down.
Yeah. So they saw people being lifted into the middle class instead of falling out of the middle class, which we had been seeing.
Right.
And then we saw states like Ohio, who also have a really pretty terrible opioid epidemic. We saw them able to treat 96% of their folks with opiate issues because of expansion. And in Tennessee, we treat about 13%. So the things that we can do if we accept these funds are just, they make all the difference in the health of our people, which means putting folks back to work and making our economy even stronger.
That's right.
And so one of those things, of course, that's always in the top three are good jobs. How do you feel about Tennessee and what we should be doing when it comes to good jobs and good wages?
The formula, in my opinion, for job growth and job creation across the state is really threefold. First of all, it's access to healthcare, which we've talked about. It's a well-funded, you know, excellent public education system. I think building on that too, though, not just K through 12, we need to think about vocational training. You know, we have a great two-year and four-year college system here. The Tennessee Promise is a blessing for lots of families. That's a wonderful thing. But 2- and 4-year college is not right for everyone. So I think we need to really build on the TCAT system. I think we need to really focus on vocational training in our high schools, our secondary schools, so that kids can who don't want to go to college can come out and have access to a trade or a skill that's going to be valuable. And that's something that you can tailor to each community, right? And it's something you can build public and private partnerships with, so that you can have sort of kind of pipeline training for companies that are established in certain communities. So definitely something we need to work on. The other piece of that pie, though, is infrastructure. And, we have a lot of infrastructure money that's going to be coming to the state of Tennessee. Unfortunately, our Republican legislators they voted against it, right? But watch out, they'll all be at the ribbon cuttings. But listen, we need to point out that this is another way that the Democrats care about what's happening in Tennessee. They care about job growth. And infrastructure, in my opinion, in rural Tennessee in particular, means access to broadband. And there are other hyper-local issues, like every community has a road or a bridge that needs enhancement. But we really need to focus on broadband for business development, because that's part of, it's like a utility, like power and water these days. So healthcare, education, job training, and infrastructure, that's the key to job growth.
Yeah, it's really critical. I was thinking of a friend of mine in a nearby county, Union County, actually, who is a graphic designer, and he has a lot of large files to send and all that. And he tried satellite even in his community, but it was down too much, and so he has to have an office here so he can have access to better internet, even though he preferred to just work from home or a small office in his county, but he's not currently able to do that. And that's frustrating. It's keeping people from living their dreams in a lot of situations, is not having access to that broadband or not having access to healthcare. I know that for a time when I was teaching, I was also tutoring on the side, and I had such a good tutor business. I kept thinking, wow, I could name my own hours and tutor and start my own business. But my problem was insurance. I had a pre-existing condition. This was before the ACA. And I would have been refused for insurance if I had tried to start my own business. So I didn't do that. And not that I didn't love teaching, because I do, but it would have been kind of fun to try my own thing and have that flexibility that you have with that. But what kept me from being able to do that was the idea that my health insurance was connected to my job. And so it gives people a little more freedom. My friends across the aisle like to talk a lot about freedom. Well, what about the freedom to stay alive, the freedom to have the kind of business that you want, the freedom to live where you want to live?
That's right.
There's more to it, and we have to spend some money in order to bring that great economy. And I like what you said about communities. Like I take the Ford plant, they're going to be making electric batteries for electric cars. So what skills can our TCATs there teach, to get folks ready for those good jobs? And, that's an example. In Ford plants, they're typically making a typical Ford salary, average Ford salary is about $92,000 a year. Average Tennessee salary is $32,000 a year. And so seeing what a good salary, good benefits look like, I think that that's important, that Tennesseans need to know their value of their work, and they need to be valued for that work. No matter what your job is, you should be valued for that work.
That's exactly right. And I think, and just speaking specifically about the Ford plant, what a great initiative for Tennessee, to be leading the nation in green energy production with, Ford in Southwest Tennessee. GM is making electric cars here in Spring Hill, and Nissan makes electric cars here. So we are really leading that green energy initiative. As Ford comes to town and as other big industrial players come to town, I think it's really important that labor gets a fair shake at the table. I mean, I believe that, organized labor, they brought us the 40-hour work week, a safe work environment, retirement with dignity. And I think it's important that they get, a seat at the table. And I'm hopeful that happens.
Absolutely. I mean, that, folks need to understand that we all have a right to due process on our job. And that's, and that's what that is. That's one of the scary things about this upcoming election, is that whole right to work vote. And it sounds nice on the surface, but I think most people, what they need to understand, it's a right to work for less and a right to be fired on the spot with no due process. And I think a lot of folks know how that works out. And in thinking about it, that is not the way to go. I think that everybody should have due process on their job and be treated fairly. And there should be things in place to make sure that folks are treated fairly.
Absolutely.
That's what the constituents want to see. That's how that's how they want to be treated. So that's how we should treat others. Absolutely. So it's all so important. It's all interwoven. And I know one of the things that we're seeing a lot about lately, at least I'm reading a lot of articles about our governor and his no bid contracts with all of this. We've got, as you talked about, billions of dollars of COVID dollars coming in to help with the crisis. And, we need to be finding out exactly how much was spent on no bid contracts for things that, quite frankly, I'm not sure how successful they were or how necessary they were.
Right. There needs to be transparency when it comes to government spending, period. And regardless of who is in office. I'm glad that you and others like Senator Campbell are asking the tough questions, because we need to know, how this money was spent. It's the people's money, and it should be transparent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that sometimes in a pandemic, you might need to move quicker than other times, but you can certainly check out bids for various services and make sure that you're going to get a product that is actually what is called for and needed. And that's the thing that really, to me, is frustrating. The sock masks were a bit of a flop. Some things like that were rushed and money was wasted instead of being well spent. Now, I think that's a problem that we tend to see because of that lack of transparency. So you don't have a problem with making spending more transparent and being more accountable to the voter, correct?
No, I think that it's actually the right thing to do, to have transparency and to have accountability so that the voters know where their money is being spent. You can make decisions nimbly, quickly, but you can also, involve folks in the decision-making process so that it's transparent.
I think that's the most critical point when you say that, involve folks. And that's what I see is missing. A lot of education decisions are being made without teachers at the table, or principals, or sometimes superintendents. Now we see doctors' decisions being made by legislators and totally discounting the physician seat at the table.
Yeah, it's pretty sad what's going on right now. I mean, they threatened to defund or disband the medical board most recently because the medical board was making decisions that are in the interest of patients in Tennessee. But the truth will be told, and physicians will not be bullied. And we won't. We will do what's right for our patients. And we take an oath to do that, and we will do no harm.
I absolutely believe that you all will do what's right, because the one thing about physicians, they have been acting on their oath and not on politics. They don't act politically. And that's why I'm so glad that you stepped up. I appreciate you so much. This has been Democratic Television in Knoxville. And thanks for being on, Dr. Martin, for governor.
Good night. Thank you. Thank you very much.